Well, we've been talking about Switch revisions for a good part of this year so far, since the Wall Street Journal, of course, went ahead and reported that there were new Switch revisions or Switch SKUs in production. And it turns out they were right, kind of, I guess, because they also talked about a Switch Pro, which doesn't appear to be happening this year. We'll talk a bit more about that one, but the Switch Lite, if you recall, is one that I had been saying, okay, that would at least make sense, make it smaller, make it cheaper. That is a reality. That's coming, obviously, September 20th. And now it does look like the current Switch that we all know, that most of us probably have, is also seeing a revision, but it is more along the lines of almost a quiet revision. It's not necessarily quiet because there is a fairly substantial difference here that we're going to go over, and Nintendo has made us all aware that it does exist in true Nintendo fashion, dropping it on Twitter. They've been doing this recently where a lot of announcements are just showing up on Twitter rather than have a full little direct for it or something. Now with the Lite, that was at least a big enough deal for them to put out a video in pre-recorded fashion, just drop it on YouTube. No live stream or anything. But this one, I think, was it just had just enough difference for them to make a big deal out of it in terms of, website, drop it on Twitter and everything. So it's not necessarily just a quiet revision, but it is a revision. However, it doesn't appear to be the revision that some people, myself included, we're hoping for. I think a lot of people were hoping, okay, if they change the internals, specifically the chip, they might have increased performance. Now, it's possible, I want to say that, and we'll talk about this as well, that this could have some sort of increased performance, and they're not necessarily advertising it, but let's talk about what's happened here. So, early this morning, it was announced that Nintendo would be releasing a Switch revision for the current Switch. So the current Switch that we have now appears to be on the way out, and they're going to be replacing it with this one. And you might be wondering, well, why are they doing that? Most likely it's because the chip fabrication has changed. Most likely, rather than the standard 20 nanometer Tegra X1, they're moving to a custom X1 that's been shrunken, most likely to 16 nanometers, and they're releasing that. Now, if you look at the Lite, that obviously has some sort of revision to the chip, and they've most likely shrunk that one as it has a smaller battery. However, it has about 20 to 25% better battery life than the current Switch. Now, here we are with a Switch that is going to massively eclipse the current Switch's battery life. And that's exciting, because that does start to push this Switch into dedicated handheld territory, which is great, because battery life is always a concern. But now you're getting close, I'll say that, to all day battery life. You're close. It's so close. So exciting stuff there. Now, this is what they announced here on their page. This is on Nintendo's Japan's website. And here's the thing. It's also been announced that it's coming to the US at the same time, mid-August. So 1 month from now, like we've talked about before, Nintendo likes to announce these things close to release date. So about 1 month, it'll be out. I will be getting it. We'll be opening it up. We'll check it out. So make sure you're subscribed and everything for that. And if you're enjoying this video, drop a like on it. But in the UK, it appears they'll have to wait till September for this Switch. However, it does look like it's going to be in stores for the holidays and everything alongside that Switch Lite. I do wonder if this is also cheaper to manufacture. However, if it is using the same chip as the Lite, they probably just want to make one chip, and that's what we assume at this time. So all of that makes sense. Now, battery life. How much better is the battery life? Because that is going to be a question that a lot of people will have. It is substantial, to the point where it's I think going to be compelling for a lot of people. As you're seeing here, we're talking a massive jump. So the one you have now, 2.5 to 6.5 hours is what it is estimated at large range. But that's, of course, are you playing an indie game or are you playing Splatoon 2 with Wi-Fi online and everything? Because that will kill your battery. They even obviously do the thing where they're like, 3 hours for Breath of the Wild. Okay, fair enough. Well, this new one that's going to be out next month, 4.5 to 9 hours, or as they say in Breath of the Wild, 5.5 hours. That is a large jump. That is almost twice the amount. I say almost because, of course, 3 to 5.5. But Breath of the Wild does use, as we know now, kind of a boost mode to play. So other games, like, let's say, Pokemon, could see 6.5, 7 hours maybe. that's getting up there for like a good part of your day when you're out. Your Switch should last, and that is amazing. That's great, because that's what a lot of us wanted when it first came out. When we first saw 3 hours for Breath of the Wild, we said, "Oh man, that's not that much, right?" Like that's one of the criticisms for the Switch is the battery life. Well, now that's kind of going away. I will also look at this and say, okay, the Switch Lite technically has a better battery than the current Switch as well. But that is a dedicated portable system. So it's interesting to see the one that's not necessarily a dedicated portable system, because it's hybrid, have a better battery life than the straight up handheld device. However, $100 difference, right? That's a big deal for a lot of people. $100, especially if you're buying for kids. So I do think the Switch Lite still has a place in the market, despite this one seemingly being like way better overall. I think the Switch Lite still makes sense for some people, especially for large families, or if you have to, like I said, buy multiple Switches at Christmas time, 2, 3 kids, that can start to add up, right? And if you could save $100 per purchase and put that towards games for each kid, I think they'd be happy with that. It also has the nice little added benefit of keeping them off of your TV, right? And kind of having them play their Switch in their room or around the house rather than take up your what might be your entertainment, right? The TV. So I get that at least. The one interesting thing about this, with this Switch, I want to point this out. It's not going to necessarily benefit, as we see here, because they've already told us the battery life. It's not going to benefit from this chip in portable mode. However, one thing is going to be tested, and it's going to be interesting to see. You'll have Digital Foundry and other places do frame rate tests and resolution and everything, is in docked mode, because in docked mode, you don't have power restrictions, for example, so that the battery doesn't get drained right away or anything, or even generally heat situations. This chip should run cooler, which is good, so you won't hopefully have what we've had before, which are warped switches or anything. However, I wonder if, because we've seen Nintendo play around with clock speeds already, boost mode and everything for loading times. I wonder if down the road they will get to a point where in docked mode they play around with the clocks with this new chip, right, through updates, and we actually see some gains in resolution, for example, or frame rate in specifically docked mode. I think they've already looked at this and said, we're going for battery life. I think that's fine. I think a lot of people would actually prefer that so that their Switch lasts, because in portable mode, you're pretty much covered by that screen being as small as it is, and it really does cover up a lot of issues. It's when you take the image and you blow it up to like a 65-inch screen or a 55-inch screen or something that you start to notice things, right? So if they can get extra speed out of that chip when it's docked and doesn't necessarily have the battery, right, being a bottleneck, that would be interesting. So we'll see about that when that one comes out. Either way, if they don't push for that, it'll at least run cooler, and you won't have these switches that are like scorching hot when you take them out of the dock, for example. That shouldn't be a thing anyway. And it's going to be interesting when we do tear this thing down, because I'm going to be very curious as to what the chip looks like. This is going to be a new chip. It's not going to be something we've seen before, so that's exciting for the Tegra line. It does appear that this is also going to be the same one that is in the Shield TV that's been rumored to release this fall as well, or this holiday. So it appears like, at least for now, this chip is going to be in 3 different devices: the Switch Lite, this new Switch, and then the Shield TV, which is pretty exciting. I think it is going to sell fairly well, obviously. I'm curious how many early adopters are going to upgrade for that battery life, because some don't take their Switches out of the dock, so unless there is some sort of gain on the dock side when it comes to resolution, some people just won't feel the need to upgrade. I am going to upgrade to this either way. Again, we're taking it apart, but the battery life is compelling, and the possibility of them playing around with clock speeds down the road also compelling. But it's going to be a new SKU. It's going to sell well, probably next to the Lite, and Nintendo is setting themselves up for a big-time holiday. So that's interesting right there. Now, the Pro is going to be talked about, I think, next year. Not necessarily by Nintendo, but by a lot of people leading up to it. There was some hope that there would be some sort of Switch Pro this year, and I was always like, I don't know. I think the Lite is probably the way they want to go because it's the cheaper model. They have to cover the 3DS. The 3DS is going away. I didn't really see where the Pro would fit in this holiday. I really didn't. I don't know why they would try to dilute the market with a Lite, a Pro, and then this new Switch. That just seems like way too much all in one year. It would make sense to space it. So I think if they're going to do a Pro, the earliest would be next year, next holiday. And that's the earliest. They might not even do one, to be honest, and just tough it out until next generation when they release it. Because keep in mind, there's going to be this year, at least a gap year, where games are still produced for the PS4 and the Xbox One and the PS5 and the next Xbox Scarlet. And the Switch could probably still get those ports as long as it's being developed for the PS4 and the Xbox One, right? So Nintendo might say, all right, you know what, we're going to get 5 years at least out of this Switch generation before we move up. It'll be backwards compatible and everything, and we'll go that route. That's very possible. And then they could even keep the Switch around in the form of the Switch Lite currently, much like they keep the 3DS around. All that's very possible, but I'm still, honestly, right now, in terms of the Pro, 50-50 on it even existing. So it's definitely not coming out this year at this point. But this is kind of the route I've been talking about as well as others on our podcast. So if you tune into the podcast, you probably were already seeing a lot of this coming. New Switch revision, mild bump in the ability of the chip, which they seem to have turned into much better battery life, which is great. And of course, a Switch Lite to hit that bottom end of the market with the pricing. But let me know what you guys think about this. Look forward to this next month. Man, there's a lot of stuff happening over the next 3 or 4 months now with systems, games. I'm looking forward to Link's Awakening. It's going to be great on this. I mean, how Link's Awakening might get 7, 8 hours out of this thing. That would be amazing. Yeah, this is good. This is good. I'm happy about this. This is great. Let me know what you guys think about this down below. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. Dislike it if not. Get subscribed as we go forward. There's a lot of stuff to cover here, so make sure you get subscribed so you keep up to date on it. I'll see you guys next time.